Yom Kippur was this week.
Indeed.
And it is the highest holy day in the Jewish calendar, a time traditionally of atonement, often associated with a fast. I don't have much more to say about that, except by way of segue to saying Hanukkah is not a high holy day in any way in the Jewish calendar. But we, being from, we are a secular household who come from different religious traditions, and we celebrate at a secular level both Christmas and Hanukkah in our home. And we have adopted a new tradition associated with Hanukkah, which makes up the epilogue of our book, a one-page epilogue. So while we are not going to continue to do excerpts from the book going forward, we were doing one a week per chapter for the 13 weeks before the publication. But the one-page epilogue, I think, will make for fodder for discussion for a little while.
Right. So we have effectively felt some license to tinker with Hanukkah, it being a lesser holiday, and exactly. Our household being a non-traditional one. And so anyway, what we've done is, in a sense, a prototype. We have tried to make it meaningful in a way that grows with us as the years pass. And anyway, Heather's about to introduce it to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll read through them, and then we'll talk a little bit about either each of them or whichever ones we feel like. So epilogue to A Hunter-Gatherer's Guide to the 21st Century. Tradition and how to tweak it. In our home, one of our annual rituals is to celebrate Hanukkah, the Jewish festival of lights that occurs just before or around the northern winter solstice. We light the menorah, as is traditional, and each night review an additional principle, which is not. Our family's new Hanukkah rules. So again, there are 8 days of Hanukkah, if we haven't said that. So there are 8 new Hanukkah rules. Day 1, all human enterprises should be both sustainable and reversible. Day 2, the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Day 3, only support systems that tend to enrich people who have contributed positively to the world. Day 4, don't game honorable systems. Day 5, one should have a healthy skepticism of ancient wisdom and engage novel problems consciously, explicitly, and with robust reasoning. Day 6, opportunity must not be allowed to concentrate within lineages. Day 7, precautionary principle. When the costs of an action are unknown, proceed with caution before making change. And day 8, society has the right to require things of all people, but it has natural obligations to them in return. So should I go through one by one, or what do you think here?
Whatever you think. I mean, I always like revisiting them. I look forward to Hanukkah and the celebration of these things.
And what we do, whatever dinner we're having that night, we don't have special 8 nights of Hanukkah dinners, but we discuss that principle around the dinner table with our boys as well. So the first one, all human enterprises should be both sustainable and reversible. And I think that reversible word is the thing that is often missing from discussions of sustainability, and is often missing in sort of more naive discussions of what it means to be a liberal versus a conservative. Right? You can be all in for progress, but not be interested in making change if that change is going to be permanent.
Yeah, and it's an attempt to fix the precautionary principle, which anybody who has tried to figure out a way to operationalize the precautionary principle realizes that it's very difficult to do, right? Because, if you interpret it very strictly, it can paralyze you. And what we don't want is to paralyze us. We want to be able to take advantage of, reasonable risks. But we very frequently find out that risks we thought were reasonable turn out not to have been. And so the reason to talk about reversibility is that if you make a change based on a reasonable guess that the consequence of it will be safe, and you do something that cannot be undone if you turn out to be wrong, you're actually taking a much bigger risk than if you've said, well, what we need to do is build up the capacity to undo this at the same scale that we have built the capacity to do it, right? So the point is, at the first moment that you invent an automobile that burns fossil fuels and makes CO2, you are altering the atmosphere, but you're not obligated to do anything about it at that level. It's such a tiny alteration that it's not significant. Mm-hmm. But at the point you ratchet up the capacity to burn fossil fuels so that you do start changing the chemical composition, of the atmosphere, you're taking a risk that you'll change the heat trapping capacity. And so therefore you need to build up in tandem the capacity to undo it if need be. And if you haven't done that, you find yourself where we are now, which is we've got to change. It is out of our control, and it threatens to trigger a positive feedback in the Arctic with the frozen methane being released, the so-called Clathrate gun hypothesis. But if we had recognized the need to be able to undo changes to the atmosphere at the same rate that we changed the atmosphere, then the point is at whatever point we discovered that this had been a mistake, we would already have on hand the solution.
Absolutely. Day 2 is the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Classic, of course, not something that generally shows up in a Jewish holiday.
Well,
but modern Judaism obviously encompasses the golden rule, as do all moderns.
And it has been invented multiple times, including Rabbi Hillel has a prior version of what we now call the golden rule. And so the point is, societies that work have figured this out as a basic principle, and it is really important that it be understood. Even, again, the devil is in the details with all of these things about operationalizing them. But
right, and they're good. They function as single sentence prescriptions in which you need to understand that conditions will vary and will affect to what degree you should attempt to make these real.
Yeah.
Right? So let's see. Number 3, only support systems that tend to enrich people who have contributed positively to the world. And I guess I would add to that, day 6, opportunity must not be allowed to concentrate within lineages. Right? The idea that we should, recognizing that we cannot actually achieve complete equality of opportunity because conditions vary. But we should be seeking to maximize equality of opportunity absolutely as much as possible for all human beings. And part of the way that we will do that is to spread the opportunity across lineages, and also to ensure that those who are profiting from doing ill in the world profit as little as possible.
Yeah, the point, throughout the book, basically we're pointing to the fact that we live in an evolutionary system, and in an evolutionary system where you profit by externalizing harm onto others, that behavior will spread and be elaborated. In a system where externalizing harm onto others is costly, that behavior will dwindle, which is exactly what you want. And really the question is, you've either built a system that evolves in a direction that's positive, or you've built one that evolves in a direction that's negative. And, how well you built it will adjust how quickly it moves in those directions. But the real question is trajectory. Which way do you want to go? And
I think, this is a good time probably to remind most of the audience, hopefully, but inform some of the idea that to identify something as an evolutionarily stable strategy, to identify that something has been promoted by selection and is thus gaining ground, is in no way to suggest that it is either a good thing or a moral thing, or that all conditions would result in that being a stable strategy. So there will, for many things, be multiple evolutionarily stable strategies. And when conditions change, either endogenous or exogenous, the suite of environmentally stable strategies will change as well. And I'm reminded, actually, one of the podcasts we did this week about the book was the realignment, and I think that's actually out now. A really nice conversation we had, and we ended up talking a little bit about the misapprehension that so much of modern academic social science has about what evolution actually is. That especially, I think, sociology and anthropology have actually taken the sort of the social Darwinist, the eugenics version of what evolutionary biology is, and imagine that that's what all of us who are trying to explain the world through evolution are doing. And it's absolutely 100% wrong, right? So what things like eugenics imagine is that survival of the fittest is both a stable state in which whatever is most fit right now is most fit forever and ever, and also that things like wealth are good indicators of fitness. And of course, in markets where you have things like opportunity having concentrated in lineages, the fact that you were born wealthy may have to say absolutely nothing about your ability to accrue goodness in the world, nor is wealth inherently a good indicator of that. But more to the point is the idea that there is no stable survival of the fittest. Everything in evolution is context dependent. And as the environment changes, so too does what the appropriate measure of fitness might be.
So I want to refine one thing here. Wealth is not a good indicator of fitness in any meaningful sense. It may lead to fitness. In other words, your wealth gives you power to protect your family and things like that. But it is not indicative of the fact that you have brought something special to the table. But it should be. Right? We should want markets that cause that effect, where wealth actually is an indicator of having provided some real benefit rather than having externalized harm.
True.
We've been very deliberate in constructing these principles. And so the phraseology is often precise for a reason. And note that we say opportunity shouldn't be allowed to concentrate in lineages, right? That is not the same thing as saying wealth. Now, obviously,
Absolutely.
there's a degree to which wealth can accumulate within lineages that is very destructive in large measure because it leads to opportunity. And so to the extent that the wealth is all concentrated, and that means that people who might be able to do something useful, which should be rewarded, don't have the opportunity because either they don't get the educational benefits or they're too preoccupied sustaining themselves. But that's a bad thing.
And this is the wise version. This is the informed version of what activists talk about when they talk about privilege.
Right. And so the point is there is a real critique in there. One needs to be really careful. The more I think about it, the less one wants a world in which the product of productivity in which our gains are evenly distributed. That's a desperately unfair world, and it doesn't do good things. And this is the failure at the heart of communism. But there is an enlightened version of, well, what do you want to equalize? And the thing that I think separates these two things is if you're a believer in markets, right, as we are, if you're a believer in markets, then they work best when everybody has access to them, right? Meaningful access, not just theoretical access, but when everybody has the tools to actually innovate and bring things into a market, then the things
not just access at the consumer level, right? I mean, it's that, not just access at the consumer level, which all Americans have pretty much, but access potentially at the producer level as well.
That's the most important thing. And so if you have a market that rewards things that are actually positive, that actually create meaningful wealth rather than transfer wealth, then the reward arising because you've innovated, the opportunity has to be spread most widely because then we get the maximum number of opportunities to evaluate, and the good ones rising then results in a reward. And that's how you get a system that evolves to meet the values that we claim to hold rather than one that is constantly running up against those values.
That's right. Let's see, don't game honorable systems. Maybe we've done that already, but
well, I would just
we haven't gamed the honorable systems.
No, we don't.
Maybe we've talked about.
I will just say sometimes with customer service, you have to be ruthless.
Customer service, there's a really good chance customer service is not an honorable system.
That's why it's written that way.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, this is one of the things, and we have this in the epilogue, not in the end of either the childhood or the parenting relationship chapter. But this is one of the messages that we were teaching our children very, very early, and all of these we were giving to our children every year, with Hanukkah. But the idea that, for instance, we as their parents have rules that they may not understand, but they are honorable. They are intended to be good. And sometimes we will make errors. And when we make errors, we are expected to figure it out and change them, or to respond to them when they figure it out and change them. But the idea that they would game us, and this is true for any parent-childhood relationship, if the parent is a good parent, is a good and loving parent, as all parents should be, but of course not quite all are, their systems, their rules that they have in place, no matter how good they are, if they're honorable, should be refinable. over time. And that is much, much harder if the child is simply reacting to, oh, it's a rule. I don't like it. And this is unfortunately a place where we have lost nuance in the modern world, among especially some on the sort of what I call the pseudo left. The idea that if it's a rule, if it's a law, if it came from the before times, whatever that means, it must be bad, is absurd. And, some of what we're being handed down right now is bad and is dishonorable and is not worthy of being protected. Things like customer service, maybe in some cases, but the idea that, for instance, the founding principles on which the United States were based, they're to some degree outdated. They're not as up to the task as they should be anymore, but they are deeply honorable and they have been deeply functional.
Actually, it strikes me. So in the book, we talk about the precautionary principle and Chesterton's fence, which turn out to be inverse of each other. And I'm thinking actually that there's another one of these about how one addresses a dishonorable system, a system built to do harm or to give control where it doesn't belong, and that it's the flip side of what we say about immoral orders, right? You have an obligation not to follow immoral orders, and you have no obligation to treat a dishonorable system as if it were an honorable one.
Yeah, this is good.
Yeah. Civil disobedience and immoral orders are the flip sides of each other, I guess.
Yeah.
Or the response to immoral orders.
Yeah, exactly. Day 5, one should have a healthy skepticism of ancient wisdom and engage novel problems consciously, explicitly, and with robust reasoning. So this is a twofer, really. It is both a that which came before has worked if it's been persistent and complex and long-lived. Persistent and long-lived being synonyms here, but that doesn't mean that it's up to today's challenges. But that also doesn't mean that you throw that out and just take whatever is new as an appropriate response.
Yeah, and so the second to last chapter of the book is really about this puzzle. It's not that we don't like ancient wisdom. We love ancient wisdom. But the point is, the more rapidly your situation is changing, the less likely that wisdom is to apply. And so the skepticism isn't like, it's not cynicism about ancient wisdom. It's you have to evaluate each of these parameters and whether they fit our current circumstances, because, how do you apply, the moral tenets of the Bible to Twitter? Right, with bots and multiple anonymous accounts and deboosting. I mean,
the Good Samaritan gets slaughtered.
Right. So we have to think about these things, and very frequently the formulation that we arrive at is you've got a value which motivated a prescription from the past. The prescription goes out of date. The value doesn't, and the question is, well, how can you protect that value in the present circumstance without obligating yourself to a prescription that's inadequate?
Absolutely. Very good. Okay, we already did the next two. So the final one is day 8. Society has the right to require things of all people, but it has natural obligations to them in return. This is one about which people will disagree. People may disagree with all of them, but I think the idea that society actually has a right to require things of us is something that many find anathema. But it is true as long as the contract is a good one.
Yeah, let's put it this way. It has to be true. There are too many of us who can't all decide to go hunt and gather and say, I reject being part of civilization. I'm going to go back and do what I was born to do. If you do that, right, the earth will not be able to sustain our population. It'll crash. So the point is, we've actually signed you up for civilization. And you can't opt out of it, right? You can't go claim territory or whatever else you might have done in the past.
So we pay taxes and we get licenses in order to drive and such.
Right.
Yeah.
However, the point is that naturally comes with the obligation that the society that robbed you of your right to go do what you feel like doing has to protect you from certain things, right? It has to protect you from the predatory behavior of powerful entities, for example.
Well, if it's an intact social contract, it's not theft. It's not having been robbed.
Right.
Right.
Well, the point is you didn't have a choice but to sign it. You were born into a society and you're obligated to be part of it. But that comes with obligations. And the problem for us moderns typically is the thing is in breach of contract, right? The systems that are supposed to protect us and are supposed to provide the opportunity that was the thing that we got in exchange for giving up our right to go hunt and gather, right? That capture is now predatory and it takes advantage of us. And so the problem is the society is in breach of contract and that changes our obligations to it.